It begins in the heart of ancient Egypt, where the sun blazed over golden sands and the gods were said to walk among men. Behind the towering stone walls of the great temples, the air was heavy with incense, and the sound of chanting echoed like whispers of eternity. To the people outside, the temple was the bridge between mortals and divinity, a place where the priests served as living voices of the gods. But inside, beneath the calm surface of prayers and offerings, lay a world of secrecy, fear, and control. The priests were not just servants of the gods. They were the gatekeepers of heaven and hell on earth. They decided who could be blessed and who would be cursed, who would be pure and who would be sacrificed. Among those chosen for divine service were the temple maidens, young women taken from their homes under the promise of honor, purity, and eternal glory. They were called the Virgins of the Nile, sworn to live within the sacred walls, untouched by the outside world, their lives dedicated to the worship of Isis, Hathor, and Ammonius. The people believed these girls were blessed, living close to the gods. But what they didn't see was how their innocence was twisted into obedience. From the moment a girl was chosen, her old identity was erased. Her name was replaced with a sacred one. Her clothes were stripped away and replaced with linen robes symbolizing purity. She was told that her body belonged to the gods now, that her thoughts, her dreams, even her tears, were offerings. At first, the rituals seemed beautiful: music, light, offerings of lotus and honey. But as the nights grew longer, the ceremonies became darker. The priests taught that purity was power, that the gods demanded perfection, and that any thought of escape or defiance was sin. The temple became a cage disguised as heaven. The young maidens were watched constantly, their every move judged as a reflection of divine will. The high priests used this fear to bend them. They spoke of cosmic balance, of pleasing the gods to ensure the flooding of the Nile, the harvest, the survival of Egypt itself. If a maiden refused a command or faltered in a ritual, she was told she had doomed her people. Some were made to fast for days, praying until their voices broke. Others were kept awake through the night, chanting before sacred statues that stared back with unblinking stone eyes. The priests controlled their food, their sleep, even their breath. In time, many forgot what freedom felt like. To the outside world, the temple shone like paradise: gold-covered walls, sweet-smelling oils, processions of smiling faces. But behind those walls, the girls' lives drained slowly into devotion, their minds reshaped by fear and faith. And the priests, wrapped in their linen of purity, grew powerful. They knew the king, the nobles, even the common people depended on their favor. A single word from them could ruin lives. The more control they gained over the temple virgins, the more divine they seemed to the world outside. But divinity is a mask that hides corruption well. The truth was whispered only among the servants who cleaned the altars at night or the guards who stood outside the inner chambers. They saw things no one was supposed to see: the weeping of a girl when the chants ended, the trembling of hands during the purification rites, the silent exchanges of fear when footsteps echoed down the marble halls. The priests told the people that the temple virgins never aged, that they remained pure forever. In truth, many disappeared. Some were said to have ascended to serve the gods directly, but their names vanished from the records. The few who returned to the world were silent, their eyes hollow, their faith broken. Yet no one dared to question. In Egypt, to doubt the temple was to doubt the gods. And so the illusion continued, generation after generation. The Nile rose and fell, the people prayed, the pharaohs ruled, and inside the temples the cycle repeated. Power disguised itself as piety, and devotion became a tool of domination. One girl, history says, tried to escape. Her name was Iset Neferu, a maiden of the temple of Hathor. She was said to be as radiant as the morning sun, her voice known across the Nile for its purity and song. But when she began to question the priests, why the gods needed silence, why the temple doors never opened, her life turned into a living nightmare. She was told that doubt was possession, that her mind had been touched by darkness. They isolated her, claiming to cleanse her spirit. The chants in the purification chamber were meant to free her soul, but she knew they were meant to break her. When she finally fled one night, escaping through a passage carved beneath the temple, She carried with her the weight of a secret so dark that history buried it under myth. Those who saw her set her hair had turned white from terror, that she spoke of the gods not as beings of light, but of shadow. The priests called her cursed and erased her from the temple scrolls. But the whispers of her escape spread like wind through the villages. People began to question what truly happened inside the temples, why the priests feared light more than darkness, why the sacred virgins were never seen again after certain rituals. It was said that even the pharaoh heard these whispers, and for the first time in centuries, the divine mask of Egypt's priesthood began to crack. But the priests were powerful, and they knew that fear was stronger than truth. They declared new rituals, greater sacrifices, more public prayers to remind the people that the gods demanded obedience. In the name of Ma'at, divine balance, they silenced the questions. The temple bells rang louder, the fires burned higher, and the chants grew stronger, drowning out the cries of doubt. The world outside saw only the beauty, never the pain. But behind those walls, among the stone statues and flickering torches, the temple virgins continued their prayers, voices trembling, hearts breaking, eyes fixed on gods who never answered. It was not just faith that kept them there, it was fear, and fear was the truest god of them all. And as the centuries passed, even the sand began to forget their names, but not their story. For the walls of Egypt still remember. And if you listen closely, when the wind passes through the ruins of Dendera and Karnak at night, you can almost hear their voices still, soft, broken, and eternal, crying out from the past for the freedom that never came. The desert remembers what the temples tried to erase. Centuries after Iset Neferu vanished, her name became a whisper carried by the wind across the Nile, a ghost folded into lullabies and forbidden prayers. Yet corruption has a way of returning to the surface, and the silence that the priests built began to tremble beneath the weight of time. A new pharaoh had risen, young, curious, and far less obedient to the priesthood than his ancestors. His name was Menkaure, and he had grown weary of the endless rituals, the endless taxes the priests demanded in the god's name, the endless fear that chained his people. He wanted to see with his own eyes what truly happened in the sanctuaries that even kings were forbidden to enter. Disguised as a servant, he walked among the pilgrims one night, through the narrow corridors of the Temple of Karnak. What he found was not holiness, but exhaustion. The hollow eyes of girls reciting prayers they no longer believed, the smell of incense masking rot, the gold fading beneath candle soot. He saw a maiden kneeling before a statue, tears streaking the dust on her face, whispering words not of worship, but of longing to escape. That night Menkaure's faith shattered. When he revealed himself to the high priests, demanding answers, they fell to their knees in false reverence, spinning tales of divine trials and cosmic order. But he saw the fear in their eyes. They knew the illusion was breaking. He ordered the archives opened, the scrolls unsealed. What the scribes uncovered chilled him. Names of maidens erased, records of rituals marked only with symbols of silence, lists of offerings that never reached the poor but filled the treasuries of the priesthood. The gods had become the mask of greed. Menkaure summoned the priests before the people, declaring that no god would demand suffering in exchange for faith. The priests called him blasphemer and cursed his name, warning that the Nile would dry, that Egypt would starve. But the people listened to the pharaoh's courage, and for the first time in generations, doubt entered the temples like sunlight through a crack in stone. The rebellion was quiet at first, whispers in the markets, prayers said not to the statues but to the sky itself. Then the silence broke. Villagers began refusing temple taxes, artisans stopped carving idols, and the sacred processions marched through empty streets. The priests panicked. Power built on fear cannot survive when the people cease to be afraid. They declared that the temple virgins had sinned, that their impurity had angered the gods, and they turned against the very girls they once claimed to protect. Some were cast out into the desert, others hidden away. But one of them, a girl named Tae, refused to disappear. She carried with her a single papyrus scroll, an old hymn said to be written by Iset Neferu herself, a song that spoke of truth greater than any god made by man. When she sang it in the marketplace, her voice trembling but fierce, the crowd fell silent. The words told of a light beyond the temple, of a love that needed no sacrifice. Within days, the song spread across the Nile, echoing from village to village until even the guards at the temple gates hummed it under their breath. Menkaure declared it the new prayer of Egypt. The priests responded with terror, setting fires to their own libraries, destroying evidence of centuries of deceit. Smoke rose over the holy cities as papyrus turned to ash, but truth had already escaped their walls. The people stormed the inner sanctums, not to plunder gold but to free the remaining maidens. The statues of the gods were toppled, their stone eyes shattering under torches. When dawn came, the temple courtyards were silent for the first time in 1,000 years. The priests were gone. Some fled to the desert, others disappeared into myth. Menkaure decreed that the temples would be places of learning, not fear, and that no woman would ever again be imprisoned in the name of purity. But history is a fragile thing. Centuries later, when foreign empires rose and fell, the ruins of those temples were buried beneath sand, their stories half remembered, half feared. Archaeologists in the modern age would one day uncover fragments, broken altars, faded inscriptions, the faint outline of a girl's name carved into stone, Iset Neferu. Scholars debated whether she was real or legend, whether her song truly sparked a revolution or merely symbolized humanity's longing to be free. But those who stood inside the ruins on quiet nights claimed they could still feel something in the air, a heaviness, a presence, a memory. The scent of burnt incense lingered as if the past refused to die. And perhaps it never did, because power always seeks to rebuild itself in new forms. The story of the temple virgins is not just Egypt's. It is every age's story, every time faith is twisted into chains and fear is dressed as holiness. The walls of Karnak may crumble, the priests' names may fade, but the echo of those who suffered in silence endures. It lives in the wind that sweeps the desert, in the whisper of the Nile at night, in the heartbeat of anyone who has ever been told that obedience is the price of love. And so the legend survives, not as a tale of gods, but as a warning to the living.